Many pieces of foreign fiction, especially if they're recent releases, only exist in one English translation. For classic fiction, however, something like Crime and Punishment or Madame Bovary, there are always several. Often when I've reviewed a book in the latter categories, somebody will ask me which translation I'd recommend. My answer is, okay, there are good and bad translations, but no reputable publisher will go with a bad one. So the question, which is the best translation, is usually reducible to which are the most reputable publishers. The answer is those with a long history who've sold lots of highly regarded books, Penguin Random House, Bloomsbury, Pan Macmillan, etc. After that, it's a matter of personal preference. But what should your personal preference be based on? My answer would be skepticism and caution. I'll explain what I mean by that with reference to firstly the Bible, and secondly a prolific translator of Russian literature called Constance Garnett, who died in 1946 at the age of 84. The Bible first. Let's imagine you're a fundamentalist Christian. You believe the Bible's inerrant. Which of its roughly 900 translations into English would you recommend? You might say, easy. The Bible's about the truth, so I'd go with the one that best preserves the original Hebrew and Greek, because obviously the closer you get to straight transference, the better. The problem is that the Bible was written a long time ago. Some of its terms don't have modern English counterparts, so what you end up with probably won't be a smooth read. And that's far from ideal because Christianity is an evangelical religion. It wants to make converts. Without a smooth read, that's going to be harder, so you'll probably have to tolerate a degree of oversimplification. In other words, you're going to have to make compromises, play accessibility off against accuracy, the spirit against the letter. You can't have 100% of both. How much of one and how much of the other? There's no right answer to that question. Of course, if a reader's that fussed about accuracy, he or she can always learn the original language. That's the Muslim solution. All translations of the Quran are interpretations. It's incumbent on every believer to learn classical Arabic. And because in principle anyone can learn a source language, it's possible that translators will mostly err on the side of accessibility, providing what not just anyone can. Constance Garnett was born in Brighton in 1861. She studied Latin and Greek at Cambridge, then became a governess. In 1891, she met a Russian émigré who taught her his own language. During the next 4 decades, she translated over 70 Russian works into English. It's probably due to her that today, most educated British readers are far likelier to be able to name 5 Russian novels than they can 5 French, German, or Italian ones. Of course, she's been criticised. Vladimir Nabokov called her translations demure, although he thought the best translators should be male, and David Foster Wallace called her Victorianish, although most of the authors she translated lived during the Victorian era. Joseph Conrad and Ernest Hemingway rated her highly, and most modern translators of the same authors will probably have her version to hand when they're working, although they won't necessarily admit it. But there's a further issue. Because new translations are coming out all the time, it's in the interests of the latest practitioners and their publishers to denigrate past attempts, especially if those attempts are now in the public domain, so no real money to be made for anyone. What I'm saying is, when you hear somebody loudly proclaim the superiority of one translation over another, you should never discount the influence of A, intellectual snobbery, and B, vested interests, especially when it comes to the latest translations. You might think it's obvious that a 21st century university professor can do better than a 19th century governess from Brighton, but think again, because translation's an art, and being a top-flight academic doesn't necessarily make you a better artist. So while it's true that Penguin Random House, Bloomsbury, Pan Macmillan, etc. will always give you a good translation, it's not necessarily the case that they'll give you a better one than you can pick up for peanuts as an ebook. So, skepticism and caution, and that's as much as I've got to say.